new versions of God Bless America that we have here. At least it's new to us. 10 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. It is a Monday morning, the 7th day of February 2022. Mark Size, your host here on the early morning program. We are in the 14th chapter of the 24th. Let's see. We are the 24th verse of the 14th chapter of 1 Samuel is where we left off yesterday. But you know what? I want to say some things about Saul. Okay, and this a little bit ties into yesterday's teaching. We went through some stuff on our service yesterday, talking about let's just get into Saul. Here's my take, and you know everything is going to be colored when I come down and I start talking more about Saul. Everything's going to be colored by my assessment of who I think this Saul is. Saul, the first king of Israel, okay, to me is the really a great example of a carnal man. If you would go with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, let's go over there real quick and we'll just look at a verse or so. Here it is, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Let's put it on the screen for you. Verse 1 says, And I, brethren, could not speak to you as spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Christ. Now, notice a couple of things as Paul is talking to the Corinthian church in this chapter, in this verse, is that number one, he's calling them brethren. So he's not excluding them. He's not excommunicating them. He's not saying, well, you guys, you were almost there, but you didn't get there. He calls them brethren. But he does not call them spiritual, but he calls them carnal, as to babes in Christ. So we get into our verses for today. We're looking at Saul, and we've looked already at some of the decisions that he has made. And we say, dude, you to be. Okay, now let me say we. Let me say, I say, Saul, you're just a carnal man, aren't you? Now, but let's look at his call. Let's look a little bit. I was looking at this morning. Chapter 10, verse 10 says, And when they came there to the hill, there was a group of prophets to meet him. Then the Spirit of God came upon him, and he prophesied among them. So Saul has the equipment that he needs. Yes, he's the first king. Yes, he has been called. Yes, it wasn't God's perfect will for them to have an earthly king. And the reason why is because the people wanted to be like all the nations around them. But God allows them, the permissive will of God, God allows them to have a king. Saul is chosen to be the man by God, not by Samuel, okay? And God equips him. But we have seen Saul, I guess the word that I can, Saul's a little flaky. And maybe more than a little flaky. And we've seen all the way since this verse, okay? Once again, the Spirit of God came upon him and he prophesied amongst them. So God, it's not like God hasn't prepared this man to walk in the call that he has for his life. And I go on, chapter 11, he's strong in war, and then other things that he has done already down the line just really concern me about this man Saul. Today we're going to be something that another thing that really concerned me. On Friday's program, it was Jonathan and his armor bearer starting the battle when Saul was sitting underneath a pomegranate tree. Now we get into verse 24, and we see Saul doing another thing that, you know what? sometimes it doesn't even make common sense, some of the things that he does. I mean, it's sometimes he speaks from the Spirit, and sometimes he doesn't. He's like Ernie would say, he's Heckle Jekyll. You just don't know which guy you're going to meet when you're going to see. It's almost like Paul has two personalities, schizoid. Verse 24, and that's just me when it comes down to looking at Saul's life. Watch this. The men of Israel were distressed that day. And you know, if you're not sure and agreeing with me about his carnal status, go just study from the beginning of Saul's life and some of the things that he does. And what an example we have in front of us today. The men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under an oath. Let me remind you first that we have a prayer line open for you at 505-425-3717. Okay? So Pauline's there on the other end of that line. You need prayer. You want to, tell her of all the wonderful things that God is doing in your life. Call that number. The men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Now, this just does not make sense to me at all. They are in the middle of a battle. He has a company of warriors that are going after the Philistines. His son and armor bearer started off the battle. Just the two of them. God showed him that he was going to give the Philistines into his hand. So they started the battle. Saul and his army come into the battle and really began to go after. But Saul comes up with something, and I know that it's colored already by the title above the paragraph, Saul's rash vow. But how else could I read this? I can't read it any other way. And let me tell you what, it scares the daylights out of me. Because I don't want to have the Saul living in me. I don't want to have this Heckle Jekyll up and down, in and out type of a experience in my daily walk with God. And I guess I'm just probably reading too much into it to begin with. But once again, you want to read it for yourself. You want to see what kind of conclusions you draw and what the Holy Spirit is going to tell you. But here we are in the middle of battle. These men are making it happen, and Saul says we're fasting until night. The men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, "Cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Now, all of the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. And when the people had come into the woods, there was honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. So these guys are in the middle of battle, and they're running after the Philistines, and they're going through the forest. And as they're going through the forest, there's honey that's all the way around available for these guys. I mean, it's not like they're going to have to stop and say, "Hey, man, we're going to have dinner before we go on, and we need breakfast. Where's the burritos?" Or, no. It's right there for them. But Saul has pronounced this vow, has pronounced this oath, saying, "No, anybody who eats anything is cursed." And they're going through the forest. There's a quick snack waiting for them. There's a granola bar hanging from every tree. But because of this oath, they're not going to get on the wrong side of Saul. And this guy is, remember, he's prophesying with the prophets at one time. So the people are trying to say, well, is this God or not? That's the way I'm taking it. Well, he was with the prophet, so I guess this is God's will, is that we don't eat anything and we just go. When the people had come into the woods, there was honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father's charge. His father charged the people with the oath. So Jonathan, remember, him and his armor bearer were off by themselves instead of out over there where everybody was at under the pomegranate tree. Him and his armor bearer were the ones who went and started the battle. And remember, in a half an acre, they had killed, what was it, like 20 men in half an acre they had killed. And then Saul came in. So he had not heard all this stuff that was going on. Therefore, he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand, dipped it in a honeycomb, put his hand to his mouth, and his countenance brightened. He gets energy from this honey, and he reaches out his staff, with the rod, whatever was in his hand, the rod. Remember, a lot of them, the Philistines didn't let them have swords. They were in charge of all the blacksmithing that was going on in the Philistines, and Israel didn't have it. A lot of stuff going on. But the enemy is the enemy, and it was time to go after the enemy, and God had opened the door for him. So what Jonathan does as he's going through the woods is he gets some of that honey and he eats some of the honey. And his countenance brightened. Wouldn't this have been a good time for all of Saul's army to have their countenance brightened? Now you say, what does it mean to have their countenance brightened? This is when we go into our other translations like we were talking about earlier and see what does it mean to get your countenance right. The Message says his eyes lit up with renewed vigor. The Amplified, which is always a good one, says he put his hand to his mouth and his energy was restored. We're in the middle of battle. That's like saying, okay, it's halftime, and we're getting ready to go out over there, but nobody can have any drinks of water. Nobody can have anything to eat. I don't know if they eat during halftime or not, or how they do it. Some of these sports, but I guess like Olympics. Now the Olympics are on. So hey, you can't eat anything in the middle of as you're waiting for. Hey, it was right now is all about energy. Anyway, Jonathan hadn't heard about it, so his countenance is brightened. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint, except Jonathan. But Jonathan hadn't heard the oath. Everybody else heard the oath. And now one of them tells, hey, dude, you're not supposed to be doing that. But Jonathan said, verse 29, my father has troubled the land. Look, Jonathan does not agree with this oath that his father made. Jonathan says, he's brought trouble upon the land. Look now how my countenance has brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found, for now there would not have been for now would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? He says, if we would have taken advantage of the spoil of their enemies, so I'm guessing that maybe the honey was leftovers from the Philistines as they ran and they scattered. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the way I'm reading verse 30. But Jonathan, for now, would there not have been a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? And I would have to agree with him. I would have to say yes, of course. Now, they have driven back the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, so the people were very faint. So they're still warring against the Philistines. They're still taking ground. But man, their energy level, they're they're hungry. And so watch this, verse 32. Watch how this oath that he makes is going to cause a lot of problems on different fronts. So they've pushed the Philistines back from Michmash to Aijalon. And the people rushed on the spoil, took the sheep, oxen, calves, and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with blood. So they're so hungry, so famished, that they come and push back the Philistines. The Philistines leave behind their flocks, and these guys are just basically ripping them open and eating the sheep, the oxen, and the calves. People ate them with blood. Now God said, don't eat the blood. From the beginning, he's been telling them that, even pre-Moses. Then they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating the blood. This was all caused by this oath that he had made. This was all caused because, the carnal man had said, I have a good idea. I remember we talked about this yesterday or day before. Last week. Let's just say last week we talked about a good idea is not always a God idea. And we need to kick the good ideas out, and we need to have God ideas. And I'm guessing that Saul just thought it was a good idea, like some of the other things that he has made and some of the other decisions that he's going to make. We're not finished with the story of Saul. This isn't the end of Saul. We're going to hear more. And we're going to hear more bonehead decisions that he is going to make, that you're just going to kind of shake your head and say, really, Saul? Really? Now, back to without looking at it, chapter 10, verse 10. He was filled with the Spirit. The Spirit of God had come upon Saul. But still he's carnal. We talked yesterday in our service about maturing in the faith and taking responsibility for the relationship that we have with God. That was the Maranatha Promise Keepers Band singing Great is Thy Faithfulness, 30 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. Getting ready to go into a weather report. Let's see what the weatherman has for us today. Sunny, high around 46 degrees, north wind at 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, high around 55, north wind at 9. And Wednesday, mostly sunny, high around 55, west wind at 8 miles per hour. So today, mid-40s. Tomorrow and the day after, mid-50s. And not a lot of wind to go along with it. And we'll keep you updated to the weather every hour at the bottom of the hour here on KLYN. And just that's the way we roll. So we're going to go back to our study for today. Want to tell you one more time, prayer line is open, 505-425-3717. Let me see. Let's take that one off. Okay. So talking about the carnal man. Talking about a man who's, you don't know what side of the fence he's on at any given time. My father has troubled the land. You better believe he troubled the land. The people have driven back the Philistines. They've taken a town back that belonged, actually, these towns that they were taking belonged to Israel originally. And the Philistines had pushed that. Now they're pushing the Philistines back. And the men, they're so famished. The people rushed on the spoil, took the sheep, oxen, calves, slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with blood. Then they told Saul, I can't say enough about this. verse 33 says, Then they told Saul, Look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating the blood. All of this was caused by this rash vow that Saul has made. Where this, I don't know. I don't know where this idea came from. I don't think we can even blame it on the devil. Then they told Saul, saying, Look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating the blood. So he said, You have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone to me this day. Then Saul said, Disperse among yourselves the people, and say to them, Bring me here every man's ox and every man's sheep. Slaughter them here and eat. Do not sin against the Lord by eating the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it there. Saul says, You have dealt treacherously. Oh, yeah, you've dealt, well, Saul, I think we have to go back to the root of the problem. So Saul says, Disperse yourselves among the people. Say to them, Bring me here. So he sends his leaders out there and says, Okay, everybody bring the spoil of war. And we're gonna drain the blood out of it properly. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. This was the first altar that he had built to the Lord. I think we've already covered him. Was unable. Was it already the chapter that we looked at? He was unable to wait for Samuel. Got way ahead of everything. Just another example of his spiritual condition. You say, well, why is this stuff in the Bible? If this guy is what you say he is, why? As a lesson to us. These things were written for our admonition. And I take that more than just the wilderness wanderings. These were written for our admonition unto the end of the ages to come. Saul built an altar to the Lord. This was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, Do whatever seems good to you. And the priest said, Let us draw near to God here. So Saul asked counsel of God, Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand, to the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. And I guess the last time we were here, I was pointing out that last sentence of verse 37 because it's still highlighted there. So Saul, after all these things that we've talked about, just in this chapter alone, but other things, other events that have happened already, more that will happen. So Saul asked counsel of God. Now, okay, let us go down. Let's go back a verse. We're not even going to cover that Saul's building an altar, I don't know that was his concern to build an altar. Now Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of. So he says, Let's keep on going, boys. Let's go get them. And they said, Hey, let's go. If that's what you want to do, sir, chief, that's what you want to do. Then the priest said, Let us draw near to God here. Oh, there's a priest amongst them. So Saul asked counsel of God. Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he, God, Yahweh, did not answer him that day. Why not? I think it's clear why God did not answer him. Maybe not to you, but to me it is. And Saul said, Come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. For as the Lord lives who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die, but not a man amongst all the people answered him. So God is not answering Saul. And Saul calls all the big shots together, all the chiefs together. And he says, There's something wrong. God is not talking to me today. There's something wrong. Who violated the vow that I made? For as the Lord lives, verse 39, who saves Israel, though it even be my son, even if it was my son, I made a vow, and whoever broke that's the reason why. I don't think that's the reason why God was not talking to Saul. I think there was other reasons. But let's go to it verse by verse. Then he said to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. And to me, that sounds like fear of the people. They keep on saying, well, whatever you want, boss, whatever you want, whatever you say. You know, they didn't eat honey, even though they knew that it was not the best idea. Oh, but it sounded like a good idea. We're going to fast all the way. Not today wasn't a day to fast. Maybe you're going to have to read other commentaries and find out what other people think about this situation. See if they agree with me or not. But to me, it just doesn't sit right in my tummy is to hear these things that Saul is saying. So Saul says, okay, me and my son on this side, all you guys on the other side, and we're going to see who broke the vow. Because that's why we have a problem. That's why God is not talking to me. You be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side. The people said to Saul, do what seems. See, these people, some of these people knew who had violated the vow. They're not going to tell Saul, though. Therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. So Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. So Saul says, okay, well, we're going to draw lots. We're going to see if it's this side or that side. Everybody else was on one side. Saul and Jonathan were on their own side. Therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, give a perfect lot. So Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, cast lots between my son and Jonathan, and me and Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. Hey, everything's pointing to you. We've been spinning the bottle, and the bottle keeps on pointing to you, son. Tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him and said, I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand. So now I must die? And Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. See how nonsensical. I mean, this doesn't even make common sense from the beginning. And it's like the snowball rolling down the mountain. It just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, somewhere down the road, Saul, all he could have said is, you know what? That was a dumb thing. You guys eat honey. Let's go get them. He had to have seen that they were weary. He had to have seen that their energy level was way low and that their ability to fight the war against the powers of darkness. Because there's a spiritual battle that's going on in the midst of all this. Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. Jonathan told him, I was only tasted a little honey, so now I must die. Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for you shall surely die. And Saul's ready to kill his son. Number one, the son wasn't even there when the vow, he had no idea that the vow or the oath had been pronounced. And Saul, he's ready to, I mean, he's the king. I mean, he's a man of his word, is he not? Well, not really. But go back to chapter 10, verse 10. The Spirit of God had come upon that man. But he's still a fence rider. But the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? So all the other people stand up for Jonathan. Are you going to kill your son? He's the reason why we have victory today. He's the reason why we've gotten as far as we've gotten today. And I don't think anybody's going to tell him, but I'll tell him. It's easy for me to tell him, dude, you were underneath a pomegranate tree. You were sitting back, taking it easy in the shade, eating the fruit of the pomegranate tree when the Philistines were coming against you in war, and it was Jonathan that started this whole battle. And then you jumped in. And then you brought your wicked oath, and I'm calling it a wicked oath. But the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. So I'm guessing it's the chiefs. But somewhere down the line, somebody says, hey, you're not killing Jonathan. It's almost like saying, what's the matter with you, Saul? What have you been drinking, man? Then Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So that's the end of that episode in Saul's life. But I'm telling you, it just doesn't sit with me. It just doesn't, and I'm telling you why. I'm telling you exactly why, because it scares the daylights out of me personally. I say, listen, I can't allow these type of situations. I mean, we all have, we're human beings. But man, oh man, and this is the leader. This is the top dog there in Israel right about now. But we can even go back further. We can go back further to the decision that the elders brought to Samuel is that they wanted a king, like all the other nations around them. So if you really want to get to the root of the root, I think that's where you have to go. And Samuel, the Lord told Samuel, yeah, give him a king, but tell him what's going to happen. Tell him what the king's going to be like. And there it is. But, okay, well, let's cut him a break. Let's say, okay. So Saul established his sovereignty over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. So, we have all these nations who border Israel, and many of them had made encroachments into the land, and Saul, as the king, is going after them. So they're just not sitting back. Okay, well, another good thing, and that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the heckle, you're going to see the Jekyll. You're going to see one day yes, or one day no. You just don't know when he's going to flip. And he delivered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. The names of Saul, of the sons of Saul, were Jonathan, Jeshui, Malchishua, and the names of his two daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal, whatever it is. I think Michal is the way. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, and the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul. Ner was the father of Abner. It was the son of Abiel. Now there was fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul, and when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. So we see a little bit of the genealogy, a little bit of the family thing that's going on with Saul. He had three sons. Okay, he had two daughters. We see his wife's name. We find out that his uncle Abner was the commander of the army. That was his general over the army, and his brother, and and then in the last verse we say, now there was a fierce war with the Philistines all the days. So Saul's going after the enemy. It's not like he's not going after the enemy. It's not like he's just sitting down underneath the pomegranate tree all the time. So it's almost like we have to We were watching a little bit of the Olympics last night. They do their sports event, whatever it is, and then the judges, give them numbers. And so it's almost like we have to look at Saul and give him some numbers and maybe get an average at the end of the day and find out, Saul, what kind of guy were you? Now, there was a fierce war with the Philistines all the days of Saul, and when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. And that was what the prophet had told the people. You want a king? Okay, we're going to give you a king, but we're going to tell you what he's going to do. Saul, imagine Saul is coming through your city. You're going to get your sons and you're going to hide them. You're going to say, hey, no, wait. He's all of a sudden, Saul comes into the Friday night football game, and he sees some of the more, and he's going to take him. He's going to say, come on, that guy's going to. He has his own draft. When Saul said any strong man or valiant man, he took him for himself. Were they going to come back home? Well, only Mama knows. Samuel also said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people. Verse 1, chapter 15. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Samuel comes and says, okay, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. I wanted to be sure that we got that missing phrase into, because we're going verse by verse, and we want to be sure we cover them all. The Lord sent me to anoint you. He says, yeah, I anointed you. You know why. We talked about it already. Now, we have a job for you. The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Okay? Saul, sit down. I need to talk to you. Take notes. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now, in God's justice, it hardly ever lines up with ours. But watch this. The Amalekites, when Moses was bringing the people through the wilderness, and I'm sure that we can find this real easy. I can give you a reference point on this. Looks like it's Exodus chapter 17. And let me read a little bit of Exodus chapter 17 that says, Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses' hands held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. So this is the reference that we are talking about. There is Moses and the people traveling through the wilderness on the way to the promised land, and the Amalekites come and ambush them. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they show up. And God says to Samuel to tell Saul, now it's time. Now it's time to take care of this business. Now it's time to punish Amalek for what he did to Israel. Now, Amalek is, to me, a perfect example of the flesh. Studies that I've done over the years, and just when I see Amalek, I think of the flesh. I see Saul as the carnal man, but I see Amalek as the natural man. I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the when he came up. Now go and attack Amalek. He says, let's go attack the flesh. Let us take care of the flesh. and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, oxen and sheep, camel and donkey. So Saul gathered, remember, and some of you know this story already. It's not brand new to you, but you know exactly what's going to happen here. But notice how Samuel tells him, put attention, Saul. Okay? The Lord sent me to anoint you king. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the Lord. Go attack Amalek, utterly destroy them. So Saul gathered the people together, numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. So we got quite the fighting force. We're going to go against the Amalekites. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. And Saul said to the Kenites, go depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. So the Kenites had been kind to Israel, while the Amalekites had not been. And Saul says, okay, you guys, it's kind of like, in World War II when they would send flyers before they would bomb an area and say, hey, we're coming with our planes, we're coming with our bombs. You just get out of the way. Saul said to the Kenites, go, depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy it with them. For you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. And let's see if I can get you a reference on this Kenite theme. It looks like it's Numbers chapter 24. Okay. Then he looked down on the Kenites, and he took up his oracle, said, firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is in the rock. So there's that's on the plus side for Saul, talking about the Kenites. And Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. So he goes down, and he's going after the Amalekites, not just one town. He's going after the Amalekites because God has told him it's time to settle the score. Saul attacked the Amalekites, verse 7, from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. Verse 9. And here we go again. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, all that was good, and were unwilling to destroy them, but everything despised and worthless, that they utterly destroyed. So what's the problem? Is there a problem here? Are we just we'll find out after the top of the hour what I think is going on there. We'll just kind of cover it. After Scott Underwood sings Take My Life. 4.5 minutes before the hour, 7 o'clock. We'll be back
Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness is what you want from me. Holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. It's what you want from me.
Well, good morning, Las Vegas. You are listening to KLYN-LP. It is a Monday morning, the 7th day of February. 11 degrees here in Vegas. Winds are calm. Humidity at 45%. Barometric pressure holding steady at 29.77 inches. And a full weather report coming up for you at the bottom of the hour. Also, let everybody know, including our Facebook and YouTube people, that our prayer line is open at 505-425-3717. Back to our scriptures for today. Right there is where we're going to be. Let's take the number off and let's get straight into it. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatling, the lambs, and all that was good. Now, let's go back up to the beginning of the chapter. Here's what Samuel told Saul. Go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and do not spare them. Kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, and camel and donkey. But Saul, then we jump down to verse 9. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, Agag the king of the Amalekites, and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were unwilling to destroy them, but everything despised and worthless that they utterly destroyed. Now, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king. For he has turned back from following me, and has not performed my commandments, and it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. Here's a classic, this is classic. This whole thing talk about the flesh, talk about the carnal man, talk about the natural man. This is classic for me. Talk about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, were unwilling to destroy them, but despised everything worthless, that they utterly destroyed them. Oh, yeah. Kill the ugly women, but save the pretty ones. That's not what it says, but I greatly regret that I've set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments, and it grieved Samuel, and he cried out all night to the Lord. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he has set up a monument for himself. So God tells Samuel, dude, this guy, man, he hasn't performed my commandments. I'm grieved that I even appointed him as king. Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul. It was told Samuel, saying, Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he set up a monument for himself. What is Samuel doing? Samuel wants everybody to know that on this day, Saul destroyed the Amalekites. Or did he? Saul went to Carmel and set up a monument for himself, and he has gone on around, passed by, and gone down to Gilgal. Then Samuel said to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord, I have performed the commandment of the Lord Yahweh. So Samuel finally catches up with Saul. And Saul comes out of the front door and says, Hey, Hey, man, you blessed brother. You the man. You the blessed man. I've done everything that God told me to do. Here's a classic. We want to talk about verse 14. But Samuel said, what then is the bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? I have performed the commandment of the Lord. You didn't understand the commandment of the Lord, homie. You didn't pay attention. You were thinking about something else, I guess. I don't know what it was. It was a simple commandment. Wipe out the Amalekites. They're a cancer, not only to Israel, but to the whole world. You know, if I'm correct that the Amalekites typify the flesh, it has to be dealt with brutally. We have to allow the cross. This is what Galatians 2:20 says. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but the life that I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself. See, Paul says, I am crucified. The flesh, the old man. Samuel's problem, he didn't know the difference between the old man and the new man. He didn't know whether he was speaking from the old man or the new man at any day, any decision that he was making. And he comes out of the house saying, ha, 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 we did it, man. And I got a big old monument to tell everybody that we did it. And Samuel says, well, then how come I'm hearing this man in the background? What is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? Saul said, watch this, they have brought them from the Amalekites. Who did? Oh, yeah, those guys. For the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed. Wow. Just a big old wow. I'm not just getting all emotional on you today or all dramatic on you today. I'm telling you, this just scares me up one side and down the other. I said, what is this all about? They have brought them from, oh yeah, we saved the best so that we could sacrifice it to Yahweh. Yahweh don't need the sacrifices of the flesh. They stink. Your best in the flesh is not good enough. They have brought them from the Amalekites for the people. And here, there's Saul again, sloughing it off on the people. They have brought them from, the people spared the best of the sheep to sacrifice to the Lord your God. Then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet, and I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night. You remember, now Saul has a real love from Samuel. Samuel really loves this guy Saul, and he's done his best to keep the boy on track. Even last night, he was praying for him all night long, grieved by what God was telling him, interceding for Saul. But Samuel could only go so far with Saul. Then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet, and I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night. And he said to him, well, speak on. Okay, let's hear it. It's almost like Saul is expecting some beautiful words to come down of blessing upon Saul because he's obeyed the word of the Lord, at least halfway. So Samuel said, hey, halfway crucifying the flesh is not crucifying the flesh at all. That little Amalekite that wants to poke up his head every once in a while has to die. He has to go. So Samuel said, when you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? That's when we went back to around chapter 10, when he was just starting off and just beginning. In fact, remember Saul tells Samuel, I'm of the smallest tribe and I'm of the smallest family. Why have you picked me? What? Well, we're going to show. We have a lesson for all of the generations to come. We have a great lesson through Saul, and we're looking at it right now. Samuel said, "When you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? Now the Lord sent you on a mission." My guess is that the Lord is telling Saul, you're not little in your own eyes anymore. Now your head has inflated. Now you think you're somebody. Now the Lord sent you on a mission. Yahweh told you. We talked about it. We sat down. I gave you the specifics. I told you, please pay attention. This is what it says. Let's go back there. I'm going to put the verse 18, but I want to go back. The Lord said to me, thus as I will punish Amalek, how we ambush them. Go and attack Amalek. Okay. Verse 1 says, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Go attack Amalek, utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant, ox, sheep, camel. And, Saul says, oh yeah, we did it. No, you didn't do it. Let me see where we were at. Was it verse 18? Now the Lord sent you on a mission and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, fight against them. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. Really? And gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me, and brought back Agag, king of Amalek. I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the plunder, sheep, oxen, the best of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. I get mad at the Saul that lives in me. That's why I get so emotional about this. Man, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. I said so. Well, wait. What did God say? And Saul tries to defend. I have obeyed. No, you didn't obey the voice of the Lord. You went to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They come to you and they bring the spoils of war, and you say, oh, that's a good one. Save that. Oh, that's a bad one. Kill it. That's a good one. Save it. That's a bad one. Kill it. The fat ones, we get off to the side. The skinny ones, the old ones, let's kill them. They're no good. We don't want to mess around with them. Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. No, you obeyed your voice. You obeyed the voice of the carnal man. You've gone to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you've said, this is good and this is evil, and this is good and this is evil. And gone on a mission which the Lord sent me, and I brought back, if you brought Agag back, how did you obey the voice of the Lord? I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. No, you have not. But the people took the plunder, the sheep, the oxen, the best of everything. You cannot justify a carnal action. You cannot justify the carnal activity. As much, we did, and we tried, and we went. Obedience, ladies and gentlemen. Obedience is better than sacrifice. So Samuel said, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Big question mark at the end of that sentence. Let me read it again. Samuel said, has the Lord Yahweh as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? So is it all about sacrifices, or is it really about obeying the voice of the Lord? Which one is it?
Obeying the voice of the Lord.
Behold, and he answers this question, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. Godly people, even under the Mosaic covenant, came to the realization that it wasn't about the animals. It was just about obeying God by faith. We do not see Saul doing this. Verse 23, oh my God, talk about the knife. Talk about the word of God penetrating deep. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. I think I have to read that from a couple of other translations to see if we can amplify it a little bit. The Amplified says, for rebellion is as serious as the sin of divination, fortune-telling, and disobedience is as serious as false religion and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. The Message says, not doing what God tells you is far worse than fooling around in the occult. Getting self-important around God is far worse than making deals with your dead ancestors. Because you said no to God's command, he says no to you and to your kingship. So, the rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. And stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Oh my God. This is the lesson for leadership here. Whether you're leader of your family, leader in your work, leader in the church. Rebellion. So here's what God is calling Saul's action: rebellion and stubbornness. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Then Saul said to Samuel, and I'm a stubborn person. I hope I don't fall into that category. I hope I'm stubborn when I hear the word of the Lord, just to hold on to it and to do what God has called me to do. But if I look at Saul in the mirror, I say, God, help me. Time to repent. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words. Finally, Saul, it's like he was trying to play this shell game. Oh yeah, we did it and they did it and we did it because and they did it because and we really did it, but we didn't do it, but we did it anyway, and it looks good on the outside, but it's still kind of stinky on the inside. Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the command. He comes clean. And you have the reason why. Because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. So, the Bible says the fear of man is a snare. Let's see if I can find that verse. Let's see if it comes up in the Snare. The fear of man, verse 25, chapter 29, the book of Proverbs, the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. So there's your Proverbs 29:25. I use this a lot because Pastor Mike spoke that to me a long time ago. As we were getting out of Espanol on the way to Las Vegas, he says, the fear of man is a snare. Saul's problem was he feared the people. He's always looking at the people, and, he's playing the political end of leadership in God's kingdom. Now, therefore, please pardon my sin and return with me that I may worship Yahweh. Give me your blessing, Samuel. Just give me your little, what's the ritual for this, so we can go on, and so I can go worship the Lord, so I can make myself look good in front of the people. But Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. I think this was one of the toughest things that Samuel ever had to do. I think this was tougher than him hearing about his sons not walking. I believe that Saul had put a lot of effort. Samuel had put a lot of effort in Saul's life. He says, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord. And Samuel turned around to go away, and Saul seized the edge of his robe, and it tore. So Samuel, he's gone. He starts walking away. Saul reaches out and grabs him. No, and he tears his robe. So Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today. This is a prophetic statement of what's going on. The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. And also the strength of Israel will not lie nor relent, for he is not a man that he should relent. Samuel says to him, dude, this is it for you. God's picking somebody else. This is where Saul is still going to sit on the throne for a while. This isn't going to be the end. It's not like if Saul, goes out to the wilderness someplace and retires. We're going to see more of Saul. But this is where Saul begins to get really, really stranger. I was going to say strange, but he's strange already. The Lord has torn the kingdom, given it to your neighbor of yours who is better than you. Oh, and all of a sudden, Saul's probably suspicious. He's all suspicious right there. That's when he starts. And also, verse 29, the strength of Israel will not lie or relent, for he is not a man that he should relent. The strength of Israel will not lie. God's not going to change his mind on this one, son. Then Saul said, I have sinned, yet honor me now, please, before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me that I may worship the Lord your God. Once again, and I'm just telling you, I'm not going to, carte blanche tell you this is exactly the way it is, but here's Saul again saying, make me look good. Just make me look good. Somebody prop me up. Give me a pill. Put some sunglasses on me. Do whatever it is, to make me look good. I have sinned. Yet honor me now, please, before the elders of my people, before Israel, and return with me that I may worship the Lord your God. All of a sudden, it's not his God, it's your God. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, bring Agag, king of the Amalekites, here to me. So Agag came to him cautiously, and Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. I don't know if Agag's been hearing all this conversation. I doubted that he has, but Agag's, they got him in a little cell someplace, and not sure what to do with him. They had already qualified him as one of the good, not one of the bad. They've gone to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and this Agag's not that bad, not enough to kill. So they say, go get Agag. And Agag saying, well, I think they're going to let me live. This is going to be. Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Samuel had to finish the job that Saul was unwilling to do. Then Samuel went to Ramah. Saul went up to his house at Gibeah of Saul. Samuel went no more to see Saul until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So there's the the end of the 15th chapter of 1 Samuel. Give us a little idea of what we're going on, what we're dealing with here. Anyway, that's it for today on our teaching. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll put our bookmark on the first verse of the 16th